All right, folks, I'm out here, the Autobahn Society. My mic's hanging out of my shirt because I lost my clip apparently. I'm running a time lapse over there, and I just thought while I was doing that, I'd take a time to just go over some stuff. This is a bulb ramper. You probably heard of bulb ramping. It's the big craze. It's the ability to make minor adjustments to the length of the exposure over time, and also be able to make adjustments for ISO changes, so you can get a really wide range of shooting from day to night and make a smooth transition. There's a lot. This is the little bramper, and in my view, it's the best bulb ramper, standalone bulb ramper there is. I have no experience with the computer-based ones or the laptop-based ones, but for a standalone system, this one is absolutely top-notch, and nothing can touch it, in my view. Unfortunately, they don't make these anymore. The guy who made them, I guess he just quit. I have a lot of issues with this thing. The software-wise is fantastic. Functionality-wise is fantastic, but the construction and build of it, I think, sucks. I don't like this stupid pad, and I don't like how it's barely long enough to touch up there, and you have to hold it in a weird way. I don't like how these jacks, they're kind of flimsy, and mine are already starting to come out, so I'm going to have to resolder those. I don't know how long this is going to last, so hopefully somebody comes up with a new bulb ramping solution by the time this one breaks, because I don't want to have to do it myself. Apparently Dynamic Perceptions might be in the works of making something like this, which is really exciting, because I know those guys are going to do it right, and they're not going to screw it up. They're going to make it, and I'm sure if they put one out, I'd be very surprised if it doesn't work just as well as this, if not better. There's a couple other systems I believe promote as a bulb ramper. There's one called Timelapse Plus. There's a couple Android and iPhone based bulb ramping, but the problem is most people don't seem to really understand what needs to happen with bulb ramping. You'll get someone who just understands how to write some code, and they think, oh yeah, this bulb ramping thing, everybody wants it. Hey, you know, I can just go ahead and write some code and throw it on Kickstarter, and I can have myself a bulb ramper and make tons of money. The problem is bulb ramping is not that simple. It's not just making some code and just having it so it will slowly increase the length of exposure. You need to monitor the shutter. You need to know more about how the camera operates and how it integrates together. You need to be able to make ISO shifts and all that kind of stuff on it. And most of these, when you see them, they're saying that it will ramp with Nikon, which is really surprising because Nikon does not work very well with arbitrary shutter speeds. I mean, if I shoot shutter speed into a Canon that's 101 milliseconds and 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, it'll generally expose for 100, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106. No problem, right? If I'm doing to Nikon though, and I do the same, 100, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, the problem is that it comes back. The problem is when it comes back, when you look at the actual output of the shutter, it does 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 105, 105, 105, 105, then maybe 112, 112, 112. So it doesn't make that gradual curve through there. So you can't just tell it to do 101, 102, 103, 104 in order to get that smooth exposure. So if somebody's claiming that their bulb ramping system works with Nikon, kind of ask them how, and be worried whether or not they really understand how it's going. And also look to see if they have some kind of a feedback. You know, you need to be able to plug into the hot shoe on the camera or a PC plug in order to see how it syncs with the flash, in order to get a true idea of how well it's working, how well it's syncing up. This one does it, and it does it, you know, very well. So it's not as simple as just writing some code and putting something in an app. I think it's going to be very misleading, and I'm worried about a lot of Nikon users are going to be very disappointed when they get one, especially if they spend $100 for an intervalometer that claims that it'll work with Nikon and it doesn't. And for the people who want to make one, do your homework on this, please. I don't think that everybody's screwed up, but I've seen several times where people say, oh yeah, it'll work with every camera out there, just making that assumption. But that assumption's a poor assumption to make. You know, you need to test, you need to verify. And when they say that it will work with Nikon, it shows me that they have not done their homework unless they can explain how they managed to get the camera to do something that it doesn't normally do without some kind of a custom firmware or something. So keep that in mind. Also, I've been asked a question recently whether or not a D800 would be any good for time-lapse. A lot of people boast about how Canon is so much better for time-lapse, and one of the reasons is it supports things like bulb ramping, okay? You can do the twist lock method and everything, but with the experience I've had, the most important thing to me is dynamic range, hands down. Dynamic range beats everything else. And that's why my D9 or my D7000 is over there doing the time lapse. My 60D is doing this video, because the 60D's dynamic range just can't touch that. With the D7000, I can expose for the clouds even if I'm shooting into the sun, and I can pull so much detail out of the shadows of what's in front of the sun to make a video out of it, and I just can't do that with my 60D. So my 60D has been pretty much delegated back to just doing videos for behind the scenes stuff, and it's been delegated for bulb ramping when I want to do it. But I don't do it very often just because it takes forever, and I'm busy, and I hope to get more time to do it, but just lately I haven't had enough time to do it. So I would say that, is Nikon good for time-lapse? Absolutely. And generally I shoot wide open. I know people say that if you're doing 5 seconds between shots, you need 2.5 second shutter speed or whatever. I disagree. I get buttery smooth shooting at 1/4000th of a second. Lately, I've been throwing neutral density filters on just to kind of confirm my bias on this, to see whether or not it's true that it does work as well. But so far, I haven't seen any better. I haven't seen it look better when I drag the exposure out to, like I say, a 20th of a second versus 1/2000th of a second. The only time that seems to be, I would think it is better, is if you have grass and stuff like that that might be moving in the wind. You drag the shutter speed out a little bit, it doesn't look all as twitchy. So that's one place where it's good. But you know, the cool thing is right now I just throw some neutral density filters on there, and I can drag the shutter speed out, and you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on neutral density filters. I spent $50 on a set of filters from, I think it was Tiffin, and they're cheap, but they don't seem to really cause any problems. They don't add any color or anything like that, and everything just it works well. I've been very pleased with those filters. So absolutely, I think Nikon is every bit as good, and I think the D800, I really want one, and main reason is for time-lapse. I think it will be fantastic for time-lapse work. One other thing, if you get a hold of me and you want me to like build a rail for you or something, keep in mind, I'm a busy person. I have a day job, I have a son, I have a girlfriend, I have a social life and everything, and I try to build these systems out and help people. I make almost nothing off of these. For all the work that goes into it, I usually get maybe about $200. And I'm gonna be honest, that's not much money for how much work I put into it. Mainly I'm doing it for the love of it, and also I do want a couple dollars in reimbursement. 200 is not a lot to ask for with as much as I have to put in to build one of these things. I've done this successfully for many people now. I've got 3 systems that are on their way out, 2 more systems that I'm finishing up, and then another 2 that were just ordered up. So it seems to be going nicely, but keep in mind there is, this is probably going to sound all bad, there is a little bit of a lead time on this, so keep that in mind. And I don't know if this thing's going to shut off on me here in a second and screw up what I'm doing here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. But I'm going to try to, oh, really quick before I end, there's a company called Skypix that just looks like they're putting out a new system. At first it looks like a dynamic perception stage 0 dolly clone, but they actually do support multi-axis. One controller, I guess, can control 3 motors, so you can do pan, tilt, and linear movement all at the same time. So that's an interesting one. It looks like it's out of Korea, and they said their pricing was going to hopefully be about $1,100 for the rail and $350 for each axis. And if that's the case, that is a deal. But we'll have to see how it works. You know, so far it's kind of an unproven system. But these people, they make astro tracking equipment and stuff like that, so I'm sure that it's going to turn out pretty good. So keep your ears out for that. And I'm going to try to keep up with just what I hear in the time-lapse world. Let everybody know what I've heard is going on. And also I'm going to try to tackle a different subject every time with this. Today was bulb ramping. I think next time I'm going to do velocity ramping and what that is. And just start going over these, because a lot of people are probably getting into time-lapse and they're hearing a lot of these terms. They don't know what they are and what they do, what everything is. And it might be nice for them to get a little bit of a 101 on that if they haven't already found out what that stuff is. So I'm going to go ahead and looks like my system's about done. I'm chewed the hell up by mosquitoes at this point, so I'm going to wrap it up and I'm going to go home. So have a nice day.